The sky above Los Angeles burned. It wasn't the usual golden glow of a California sunset, nor the hazy smog that often hung over the city like a shroud. No, this was different. The air was thick with ash, and the sun, what little of it could be seen, was a dull, angry red, obscured by smoke that stretched from horizon to horizon. The wildfires had been raging for weeks now, consuming everything in their path: homes, forests, even entire neighborhoods. And yet, amidst the chaos, there were whispers. Whispers of something older, something darker. I stood at the edge of what had once been a suburban neighborhood, now reduced to blackened ruins. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I'm a fire investigator. Or at least I was. These days, I'm more of a pariah in the scientific community. My colleagues call me a conspiracy theorist, a crackpot. They say I've lost my way, chasing myths instead of facts. Maybe they're right. But when you've seen what I've seen, when you've felt the weight of something ancient pressing down on you, it's hard to go back to believing in simple explanations. The heat was unbearable, even through my protective gear. Sweat dripped down my face as I crouched to examine the ground. The fire had swept through here just hours ago, leaving behind a landscape of charred debris and twisted metal. But there, in the middle of the devastation, was something that shouldn't have been there. A patch of earth untouched by the flames. I knelt closer, brushing away the ash to reveal a smooth, flat stone. It was about the size of a dinner plate, and etched into its surface were symbols. Ancient, intricate, and unmistakably deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. I'd seen symbols like these before in my grandmother's stories. She was a Hopi elder, and she used to speak of a time when the world would be purified by fire. "The old gods will awaken," she would say, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and reverence. "And they will judge us all." I pulled out my notebook and began sketching the symbols, my hands trembling slightly. The first one looked like a spiral, curling inward like a whirlpool. The next was a series of jagged lines, like lightning frozen in stone. And the last was a circle with a single dot in the center. It looked almost like an eye, staring up at me from the depths of the earth. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from behind me, low and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. I spun around, my heart pounding, and there he was. A man, or at least he looked like a man. He was tall, with broad shoulders and skin the color of burnished bronze. His hair was dark and wild, falling in waves around his face, and his eyes were the color of molten gold, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the stone tablet. "You found it," he said, his voice tinged with something like awe. "The first of the four." "The first of the four what?" I asked, my mind racing. He looked at me then, and for a moment I felt like he could see straight through me, like he knew every secret I'd ever tried to hide. "The trials," he said simply. "The gods have begun their judgment. And you, Dr. Vasquez, have been chosen to bear witness." I wanted to laugh, to tell him he was crazy, that this was all some elaborate hoax. But the look in his eyes stopped me. There was something ancient there, something far older than the city around us. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a faint, enigmatic curve of his lips. "My name is Kairos," he said, "and I am the messenger of the fates." Before I could respond, a sound cut through the air. A low, guttural roar that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Kairos's expression darkened, and he grabbed my arm, pulling me to my feet. "We need to go," he said urgently. Now, I didn't argue. Something in his tone told me that whatever was coming, it wasn't something I wanted to face alone. As we ran, I glanced back at the stone tablet, now half buried in ash. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, as if alive with some unseen power. And in that moment I knew. The fires weren't just a natural disaster. They were a warning. The gods were awake. And they were angry. The world outside was a blur of smoke and flame as Kairos and I ran. My lungs burned with every breath, the acrid air clawing at my throat. The roar behind us grew louder, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. I didn't dare look back. Whatever was chasing us, I didn't want to see it. Kairos moved with an unnatural grace, his steps sure and steady even as the ground cracked and shifted beneath us. He led me through the ruins of the neighborhood, weaving between collapsed buildings and charred vehicles. I struggled to keep up, my legs aching and my mind racing. Who or what was Kairos? And what had I gotten myself into? We finally reached a small, half-destroyed gas station. Kairos pulled me inside, slamming the door shut behind us. The windows were shattered, and the air inside was thick with dust and the smell of burnt plastic. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. I nodded, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The roar outside grew deafening, then slowly faded into the distance. Kairos exhaled sharply, his golden eyes flickering like embers in the dim light. "We're safe for now," he said, his voice low. "Safe from what?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What was that?" He hesitated, his gaze distant. "A guardian," he said finally. "One of many. They've been awakened by the fires, tasked with ensuring the trials proceed as intended." "The trials," I repeated, my mind racing back to the stone tablet. "You said there are 4. What are they? And why am I involved?" Kairos turned to me, his expression unreadable. "The trials are tests," he said. "Each one corresponds to an element: fire, water, earth, and air. They are meant to judge humanity's worth. If we fail, the world will be consumed. If we succeed," he trailed off, his gaze dropping to the floor. "If we succeed, what?" I pressed. "If we succeed," he said slowly, "the gods may grant us another chance. But the trials are not just about survival. They are about redemption, about proving that humanity is capable of change." I stared at him, trying to process his words. It sounded like something out of a myth, a story my grandmother might have told. But the fires, the tablet, the thing that had chased us, they were all too real. "Why me?" I asked finally. "Why did you say I was chosen?" Kairos studied me for a long moment, his golden eyes piercing. "Because you are connected," he said. "Your grandmother was a keeper of the old ways. She knew the prophecies, the signs. And you have her blood. Her strength. The gods see that in you." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I'm not strong," I said. "I'm just a scientist who lost her way. I don't know anything about gods or prophecies." "You know more than you think," Kairos said firmly. "And you're not alone. I will guide you, but the path ahead is dangerous. There are others who seek the tablets, those who believe the apocalypse is necessary. They will stop at nothing to ensure the trials are completed." "Who are they?" I asked, my stomach twisting with dread. "A cult," Kairos said, his voice darkening. "They call themselves the Children of the Flame. They believe that only through destruction can humanity be reborn. They have already claimed the second tablet." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Where is it?" "In the ruins of a museum," Kairos said. "But retrieving it won't be easy. The cult is well organized and their leader is formidable." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "So what's the plan?" Kairos reached into his coat and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. It was old, the pages yellowed and brittle. He handed it to me, and I opened it carefully. Inside were sketches of symbols, the same ones I'd seen on the tablet. "This is a guide," he said. "It will help you decipher the tablets. But we must move quickly. The fires are spreading, and the trials are already underway." I nodded, flipping through the pages. The symbols seemed to shift and dance under my gaze, as if alive. "What about the other tablets?" I asked. "Where are they?" "The third is hidden in the mountains," Kairos said. The fourth is a mystery. But we will find it. We must." I closed the book, my hands trembling. "And if we fail," Kairos's expression hardened. "Then the world burns." The mountains loomed in the distance, their jagged peaks cutting through the smoky haze like the teeth of some ancient beast. Kairos and I had been driving for hours, the landscape around us a blur of ash and charred remains. The fires had spared nothing, leaving behind a wasteland that felt more like the surface of another planet than the California I knew. I clutched the leather-bound book Kairos had given me, its pages filled with symbols that seemed to shift and dance under my gaze. The third tablet was hidden somewhere in these mountains, and with it, the key to understanding the trials. But the closer we got, the more I felt a sense of dread creeping into my chest. "What do you know about the third tablet?" I asked, breaking the silence that had settled between us. Kairos kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. "It is tied to the element of earth," he said. "The trial of earth is about resilience, about standing firm in the face of adversity. The tablet will test your strength, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually." I frowned, flipping through the pages of the book. "And the cult? The children of the flame. Do you think they'll be there?" "Almost certainly," Kairos said grimly. "They will stop at nothing to ensure the trials are completed. They see the apocalypse as a necessary cleansing, a chance to start anew." I shivered despite the heat. The thought of facing them again made my stomach churn. But there was no turning back now. The fires were spreading, and the world was running out of time. We reached the base of the mountains as the sun began to set, casting an eerie red glow over the landscape. The air was cooler here, but no less oppressive. Kairos parked the car at the edge of a narrow trail, and we began our ascent on foot. The path was steep and treacherous, the ground loose and unstable. Every step felt like a battle, the weight of the book and the weight of the world pressing down on me. Kairos moved ahead with ease, his movements fluid and precise, but I struggled to keep up. "How much farther?" I asked, my breath coming in short gasps. "Not far," Kairos said, though his tone offered little comfort. "But the trial has already begun. Stay close and stay alert." As if on cue, the ground beneath us began to tremble. I stumbled, catching myself on a nearby rock as the earth shifted and cracked. A low rumble filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. "The trial," Kairos said, his voice tight. "The earth is testing us. We must prove our worth." The ground split open ahead of us, a yawning chasm that seemed to stretch into infinity. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no way across, no bridge, no path, nothing but empty air. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Kairos turned to me, his golden eyes glowing in the dim light. "We jump," he said simply. "Are you insane?" I demanded. "We'll never make it. We have to," Kairos said. "The trial demands it." "Trust me, Alina." I stared at him, my mind racing. Trust him? I barely knew him. But what choice did I have? The ground was still shaking, the chasm growing wider with each passing second. "On my mark," Kairos said, his voice calm but firm. 1, 2, 3, we jumped. For a moment I was weightless, suspended in midair as the chasm yawned beneath me. Then my feet hit solid ground and I stumbled forward, my knees buckling beneath me. Kairos caught me before I could fall, his grip firm and steady. "You did it," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. I looked back at the chasm, now closing as quickly as it had opened. My legs felt like jelly, but I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. Maybe I was stronger than I thought. We pressed on, the path growing steeper and more treacherous. The air grew colder, the smoke giving way to a thick fog that clung to the ground like a living thing. And then finally we reached it. The third tablet was embedded in the side of a massive boulder, its surface covered in the same intricate symbols as the first. But this time, the symbols seemed to pulse with a faint, golden light, as if alive. "This is it," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. "The trial of Earth." But before I could reach for the tablet, a voice cut through the silence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. A figure emerged from the fog, tall and imposing, his face obscured by a hood. Behind him stood a dozen others, their faces hidden but their intentions clear. The children of the flame had found us. The fog clung to the mountainside like a shroud, muffling sound and distorting shapes. The figure who had spoken stepped forward, his hood falling back to reveal a face that was both familiar and alien. His eyes burned with a fervor that sent a chill down my spine, and his voice carried the weight of someone who believed, truly believed, in the righteousness of his cause. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," he said, his tone almost mocking. "We've been expecting you." I glanced at Kairos, who stood beside me, his golden eyes narrowed in concentration. His hand twitched as if ready to summon some unseen power, but he remained still, waiting. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. The man smiled, a cold, humorless expression. I am Ignis, he said, leader of the Children of the Flame. And you, Dr. Vasquez, are standing in the way of destiny. Destiny, I shot back. You mean the end of the world? Ignis spread his arms wide, as if embracing the chaos around us. The world as we know it must end, he said. Only through fire can we be reborn. The gods have decreed it, and we are their instruments. I shook my head, my grip tightening on the leather-bound book. The trials aren't about destruction, I said. They're about redemption, about proving that humanity is worth saving. Ignis laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Redemption. Humanity has had its chance. We've squandered it. The gods have seen our greed, our cruelty, our indifference. They've judged us, and their verdict is clear. Behind him, the other cultists murmured in agreement, their faces hidden but their voices filled with conviction. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. These people, this cult, had twisted the prophecy to suit their own ends. They didn't want redemption. They wanted destruction. You're wrong, I said, my voice rising. The trials are a test, not a punishment. And I won't let you use them to justify your madness. Ignis's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold fury. Then you leave me no choice. He raised his hand, and the ground beneath us began to tremble. The cultists surged forward, their movements unnaturally swift, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. Kairos stepped in front of me, his body tense, his golden eyes blazing. Stay behind me, he said, his voice low and urgent. I nodded, clutching the book to my chest. The symbols on the third tablet pulsed with a faint, golden light, as if responding to the chaos around us. I knew what I had to do. As Kairos engaged the cultists, I turned to the tablet, my hands trembling as I flipped through the pages of the book. The symbols seemed to shift and dance, their meanings becoming clearer with each passing moment. The trial of Earth was about resilience, about standing firm in the face of adversity. And I would not falter. I began to chant, the words foreign yet familiar, as if they had been buried deep within me, waiting for this moment. The ground beneath my feet grew warm, then hot, and I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. The tablet's light grew brighter, illuminating the mountainside and casting long, jagged shadows. Ignis turned to me, his eyes wide with shock. What are you doing? He demanded. What I was chosen to do, I said, my voice steady. The ground erupted, sending the cultists sprawling. Kairos took advantage of the chaos, his movements a blur as he disarmed and incapacitated them with ease. Ignis stumbled back, his face twisted with rage. You can't stop this, he shouted. The trials must be completed. They will be, I said. But not the way you want. I placed my hand on the tablet, and the light flared, blinding in its intensity. The symbols seemed to leap from the stone, swirling around me in a vortex of golden light. I felt a connection, deep and primal, to the earth itself. It was as if the mountain was speaking to me, its voice ancient and powerful. The trial of Earth is complete, I said, my voice echoing with a strength that wasn't entirely my own. Humanity has proven its resilience. The light faded, and the ground grew still. The cultists lay unconscious, their weapons scattered around them. Ignis stared at me, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. You don't understand, he stammered. The gods demand nothing, I said, cutting him off. They offer a choice, and we've made ours. Kairos stepped forward, his expression grim. It's over, Ignis, he said. The trials are not yours to control. Ignis sank to his knees, his defiance crumbling. The fight had gone out of him, leaving behind only a hollow shell of the man he had been. I turned to Kairos, my heart heavy but resolute. What now? I asked. He looked at me, his golden eyes filled with a quiet pride. Now, he said, we prepare for the final trial. The air was thick with tension as Kairos and I stood at the edge of the mountain, the third tablet now safely in my possession. The fires below had begun to subside, but the sky above was still choked with smoke, the sun a dim, red orb barely visible through the haze. The final trial loomed before us, and with it, the culmination of everything we had fought for. The trial of air, Kairos said, his voice low and steady. It is the last of the 4 trials and the most unpredictable. Air is the element of freedom, of change. It cannot be controlled, only understood. I nodded, clutching the leather-bound book to my chest. The symbols on the third tablet had revealed the location of the fourth and final tablet, a remote island shrouded in myth and legend. According to the prophecy, the trial of air would test humanity's ability to adapt, to embrace change without losing sight of what truly mattered. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Kairos turned to me, his golden eyes filled with a quiet determination. "We face it together," he said. "But remember, Elena, the trial is not just about survival. It's about understanding, about finding balance." We made our way to the coast, where a small boat awaited us. The journey to the island was treacherous, the sea churning with waves that seemed to rise and fall with a will of their own. The air grew colder as we approached, the sky darkening with storm clouds that crackled with electricity. When we finally reached the island, it was unlike anything I had ever seen. The landscape was barren, the ground covered in jagged rocks and twisted trees that seemed to claw at the sky. At the center of the island stood a massive stone archway, its surface covered in the same intricate symbols as the tablets. "This is it," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. "The trial of air." As we approached the archway, the wind began to howl, tearing at our clothes and stinging our skin. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, and I felt a pressure building in my chest as if the island itself was testing us. "Stay close," Kairos said, his voice barely audible over the wind. We stepped through the archway, and the world around us shifted. The barren landscape gave way to a swirling vortex of wind and light, the air alive with energy. I felt myself being lifted off the ground, the wind carrying me higher and higher until I was suspended in midair, surrounded by a maelstrom of sound and color. "Elena," Kairos shouted, his voice distant and distorted. I tried to respond, but the wind stole my words, leaving me alone in the chaos. The trial had begun. The wind carried me through a series of visions, each one more vivid and intense than the last. I saw the world as it was, ravaged by fire and destruction, and I felt the weight of humanity's failures pressing down on me. But I also saw glimpses of hope, of people coming together to rebuild and heal. The visions shifted, and I found myself standing in a vast, empty space, the air still and silent. Before me stood a figure, tall and imposing, their face obscured by a swirling mask of wind. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure tilted their head, as if considering my question. "I am the spirit of air," they said, their voice echoing with the sound of 1,000 whispers. "And you, Elena Vasquez, have been chosen to face the final trial." "What do I have to do?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. The spirit of air stepped closer, their mask shifting and changing with every movement. "The trial of air is about understanding," they said. "About finding balance between chaos and order, between freedom and control. To pass this trial, you must prove that humanity is capable of change, of growth." I nodded, my mind racing. The spirit of air extended their hand, and I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. The wind around us grew stronger, carrying with it the voices of countless people, each one telling their story, their hopes and fears, their dreams and regrets. I closed my eyes, focusing on the energy within me. The symbols from the tablets flashed in my mind, their meanings clear and unmistakable. The trials were not about punishment, but about redemption, about proving that humanity was worth saving. When I opened my eyes, the wind had stilled, and the spirit of air stood before me, their mask now a calm, serene expression. "You have passed the trial," they said, their voice filled with a quiet reverence. "You have proven that humanity is capable of change, of growth. The gods have seen your strength, your resilience, and they are pleased." The spirit of air extended their hand once more, and I felt a surge of energy as the final tablet appeared before me, its surface covered in the same intricate symbols as the others. "Take it," the spirit said, "and know that the trials are complete." I reached out and took the tablet, feeling a sense of relief and accomplishment wash over me. The wind around us grew still, and the island began to fade, the landscape shifting and changing until we were back at the stone archway. Kairos was waiting for me, his golden eyes filled with a quiet pride. "You did it," he said, his voice steady. I nodded, clutching the final tablet to my chest. "We did it," I said,